Hey, welcome back. We're building a RANS S21 plane. First, quick disclaimer, reminder that none of my videos are instructional videos. I'm a first-time builder and I'm just documenting my build and hoping that some others may enjoy my documentation. Quick update on my EAA chapter. We have our first Young Eagle event on Sunday, rain permitting. I understand all the chapters do it a little bit differently. We start ours around 11 o'clock. We do an abbreviated ground school, very basic, for about an hour. And then we start flying at noon. We've got 6 planes this Sunday, which is about typical for one of our events. And then we also do barbecue, burgers, and dogs. And then we wrap everything up about 3 o'clock. And we usually get 35 to 40 kids in the air. So that's the way, that's our format. That's what we do. In this episode of the build, I start the engine cowling and finish up, or don't finish up, continue to work on some wiring, engine wiring and avionics wiring, which is necessary to get the boot cowl on. So with that, let's jump in to the cowling work. To get started on my cowling, I started getting the main cowling pieces from my storage area. You've got some text pages started on 1121, parts pages, figures pages, and then some miscellaneous parts that are going to be necessary. Okay, and starting the instructions, they say the starter ring, prop extension, spinner backing plate, and boot cowl must be installed before installing the cowling. So I've got to get the boot cowl installed. And then they also say that there's these spacing bars needed, which you use some 3/8 wood, I think. I'll check the instructions, but you need to install this also. I've got my boot cowl attached. I hadn't looked at that in a long time. Had to clean it off, collected a lot of dust, but that wasn't a problem. And then I've got the flywheel, the spacer, and then the spinner plate. But when I put this 3/4 inch wood in here and then tighten it down with the bolts, I notice it's got a bend to it. So if it's supposed to be 3/4 inch out, that bend is not going to work. So I'm going to research and figure out what I'm supposed to do with that. Well, okay, that's a pretty good laugh. I did the research, and this is all wrong. And in looking at the picture and the diagram and just wanting to follow directions, they certainly look like they're pretty tight together right around these screw holes, but they're supposed to go more to the outside and go on the back side of the prop extension. What's going to happen is if they're on the back side here, when you bring the cowling up, there's supposed to be that 3/4 inch gap behind here. So I'll reinstall that. The other thing is when it says attach your boot cowl, it looks like they mean rivet it and attach it. I'm almost there, but I can't yet. I'm going to keep going on the cowling. I'm waiting for 2 wires to finish up some wiring under here. So I don't want to rivet this whole thing yet because I don't want to have to work from underneath. Okay, I think this is what they mean. This way when the cowling comes up, there'll be a 3/4 inch spacing between the spinner plate. RANS shipped these cowlings with some cardboard taped, and this tape is incredibly hard to get off. I used my heat gun and took it off carefully, but it left this real sticky residue, and now I'm spending a long time getting this residue off. Maybe I don't. I'm just using acetone, and it's a lot of elbow grease, so be prepared. I don't know if I'll count this as build hours or not, but it's going to be a couple hours. I just finished that one side, and it took a long time to get this all off. Okay, I've got the glue off the side of the cowls all cleaned up. That took a while. The next thing it says to lay them on the aft side and match them up to see where the cutting is. I think the first cutting we're going to do is we're going to cut out for the prop space. And they say to leave a 1 inch round on both the upper and the lower. The first step, the manual has you work on the bottom cowl, and I used a piece of aluminum where I made a 1 inch mark, and I used the dot method going around and created 1 inch dots all the way around, and I will use a skill saw I think I'll use a skill saw. I think a skill saw with a metal blade is what Derek Kenny mentioned is the best blade. And then they also have you cut out this scoop here. These two cuts went fairly well. Following those lines around with the jigsaw wasn't that difficult. Sanded that a little bit. I used a Dremel for this. That went pretty well. I nicked the hub of the Dremel right here as I was getting it in here, but that should paint over. The next thing they want you to do is they cut out like a half moon cut here, which is where your exhaust pipes will come out. And this is the bottom cowl. Remember, this is the bottom of the plane. The manual has you cut this semicircle 16.5 inches wide by 11.5 inches deep. Some of the builders had questioned whether this 11.5 was before or after you trimmed it. And I think it was Tony from RANS that indicated there's also a measurement that's 9 inches from the edge of this scoop opening down to the top of the circle. So that'll help determine the top of your half circle. So the question comes down to is how many things in your garage do you have to create a half circle and then bring the shape down to the corners? It obviously can't be symmetric, so I've just kind of created the half circle and then kind of straight lined it down to the corners. Well, that cut went pretty well, I think, but we're 16.5 inches across on the bottom, and I did have to readjust my exhaust pipes as I measured them and centered them. They were about 18 inches, so I had to kind of undo this ball joint in here or universal kind of joint, and then move the pipe in and twist it a little bit and get them. So they're now 15.5 inches across. And I've seen other builders, and they've ended up cutting a little bit extra down in here to make it fit. But we'll fit it up, and we'll see how close we are. I'm also cleaning up some stuff. The manual does say to have the boot cowl installed. I'm hoping that Clecode works okay, because I still have my NACA ducts. I've got some wiring. I've got a little bit more work to do in here. Outside air temperature and static pressure. Static pressure here. Maybe outside air temperature in the NACA. I've heard some have done it. Some have said that the temperature might be off a little bit because of the proximity to the motor. Others, I've seen a lot that have done it that way. The problem is the outside air temperature wiring they give you isn't long enough to go out, so you have to do some extension of wires, and I hate putting more crimps into wires and added extensions when not necessary. So I am considering mounting it in here. I did add some of my tubing to get that finished up. I made sure everything was done back in here. I added a Del clamp here to get the wires off of the engine mount. And I think I'm almost done with all my wiring, just a little bit more to go. So I'm going to fit up that bottom cowling and see where we're at. It looks like I'm going to have to finish up some work in here before I advance with the cowling. The cowling needs the spacer, the spinner, and everything on before you fit up the cowling. I can't do that because I haven't finished with my alternator yet. I've got these mini sensors from Lightspeed that I had to have replaced. That's a long story. I'm not sure if I'm going to do a video on that or not. But they run up, and you can't do that. You can't get the flywheel on until the mini sensors are in place. So I think I have to go back and do more engine work, get this all finished up, and then come back and get my cowling on. And I've removed the Clecos from the first row, so hopefully that's enough to fit up the cowling. I hope I don't have to rivet all this. I've got a little bit more work to do, as I mentioned before. So back to doing some engine work. I did my first trial fit up, and there's going to be a lot of adjustments. And underneath, I do need to cut out a little bit more for the pipes, which is what I thought I'd have to do. But I didn't want to go too far until I had a trial fit up on it. So we'll make those adjustments and get the cowling temporarily placed in. The manual says to cut both the upper and the lower, so I've used the same 1 inch, used the tool with a 1 inch mark on it and did my dot all the way around, and that'll be my cut line. Okay, the manual does say to trim the joggle areas of the lower cowl. Refer to 1123. Who else had to look up joggle area? I didn't know what that was. That's just basically a notched connection. So the joggle areas in the diagram are this trim along here. So it looks like we're supposed to trim the joggles to 1 inch all the way around. For marking the line, I created a 1 inch spacer from the carbon fiber that was cut previously. And by putting it up here, then I just put my marker on the outside and I just ran it down the side with the marker on it. And that helped me draw these lines pretty quickly. I've got my rebuilt mini sensors back. This is what connects to the flywheel and goes back to the ignition box. When I had this AP work on my plane and help me with some wiring, he had cut these ends off and set up a 9-pin connection with his setup. And talking to Klaus at Lightspeed, he said he would not recommend or approve that, even though my mechanic said he had the conversation with Klaus, but there's some discrepancy. So I did reorder these, and I've got to reinstall them and get them up to the light box. And once again, I'm working on my ignition system, which, even though Klaus says read the manual, it's right there. It really was not right there, or is not right there for me. So I'm moving on with getting these mini sensors on and getting my ignition hooked up. Okay, I reinstalled these mini sensors, and again, that's a long story about replacing them. I ran them underneath the baffle with some loom to protect it in here. Ran it through some Adele clamps here. Cut a little bit. This was already here, my baffle here. Then I couldn't get either end of the sensor through my firewall, so I created a small little grommet cut in the top of the firewall. I hate poking holes in the firewall because of the smoke, but I'm going to have to seal this up a little bit better than that grommet, although there are other grommet pass-throughs per the manual, but the fewer the better. And then I ran it through the center shelf hole, and now they're hanging down here. What I've done with the mini sensors is I set them all the way out in the most forward position, and the gap between the sensor and the flywheel is supposed to be 0.003 to 0.006. A friend of mine said that the 3/16 thin washer is just about the right gap that you need. So I taped on a thin washer to the upper and lower and just tightened these a little bit snug. And then as I pushed the flywheel on, I pushed them, the flywheel then pushed them back using the washer as a spacer. Then I took the flywheel off and tightened these up. So the gap should be set for the timing in the flywheel. The next section I'm cutting is this section right here where it says it's supposed to be 2 inches back. So you're cutting the round back here so that it's 2 inches. It's a little bit confusing looking at the picture. You got to kind of stand it up and kind of figure out what they're asking you to cut. So I measured out. So this length is 2 inches this way. And then it changes kind of as you go around. So you got to be careful because this is not, you're not measuring from the bottom, you're measuring from the top. So I think I've cut this line correctly. And I just trimmed this one. It looks correct. I'm using my Dremel to do it. And I'm cutting it just a little conservatively in case I need to sand it or trim it a little bit later. Well, that's a good place to stop for now. That section took 16 hours even. That brings the build time to 1277.3 hours project to date. In the next episode, we attach the Naka scoop, outside air temperature, the pitot-static ports. I run some pitot lines from the G3 back and out to the pitot-static, and maybe some other pre-cowling work. And I think we'll get going on the cowling again, but we've got a lot of pre-work to get done also. So with that, thanks so much for watching, and remember, dream it and just build it.